Greetings, one and all. This is Chris McElrath speaking to you from East Timor. There may be a few sounds in the background, but I feel there are some urgent matters to address. The most urgent of all, as you may already guess if you've seen some of my stuff, is about 5G. This is the most urgent threat being faced by life on Earth. It's a whole lot worse than 4G and all the other sort of Wi-Fi's and so on, which are already decreasing the birth rates of most species, including humans. There's a huge amount of research on that. Dr. Martin Pall is a very good example, Pall. He's a professor emeritus and been studying these matters very deeply, and he's one of many scholars who've looked very deeply at this and concluded that it is not only the most stupid thing ever gone into by the human race since the beginning of time, but it is already impacting on us and will cause the end of our species. So that's the most important item, forgive the trucks and so on. But let me whip down a few other items. Money, media, chemtrails, glyphosate, fluoride, food processing with poisons, agricultural poisons, pharmaceutical poisons, cannabis, the China virus, the coronavirus, and global warming. Having already said quite a bit about 5G, which I have actually now read a reasonable quantity of research, enough to know what I've just said is true. But global warming, no, folks, that's not a happening thing. If you look at the actual number of sunspots, which of course directly impacts the amount of heat that arrives on Earth from the sun, the number of sunspots as mapped over the last many years is decreasing. Hence, we are heading for an ice age, not a global warming. Look up the research if you like. I'll try and add something in there which gives you the government statistics. They're not trumped up by some fool in the pub. These are the official statistics on the number of sunspots. No global warming. Virus, fortunately, that's also a complete fake. If you actually look at the fact that 300,000 people or more per year die from pneumonia in China, and that's been happening for a number of years, way before this new virus, which, by the way, there's no proof that if anyone's got the virus that's associated with any illness. But what is very definitely certain is that there's pneumonia being caused by a huge array of toxic poisons in the Chinese cities. You've only got to go to China, which I have, and you look at the brown skies. That's not something that one wishes to breathe, and it's very harmful and does create pneumonia, which they've now kind of effectively said that we're not going to test for the virus, we're going to test for lung congestion and say that is the coronavirus. This is very false and fabricated, and if you doubt that in the slightest, then read research from John Rappaport, who's written many articles, having done more than 30 years research on all the previous epidemics that turned out to be inconsequential after all of the sort of massive propaganda at the time that they were on, the swine flu and all those other things, SARS. There was almost nothing. The maximum number of deaths in the whole world was in the hundreds, vastly less than the deaths from flu. So you can look up John Rappaport, www.nomorefakenews.com. Have a look at that if you're in any doubt at all. Cannabis. Now, we've had decades since I think the 1930s. Cannabis has been, the worst thing on earth. Causing immediate addiction to harder drugs and all the rest of the hideous propaganda, what an awful thing it is. And now we see that the medical research is showing that it definitely cures epilepsy. It's extremely effective against cancers, depending on which bits of the cannabinoids and so on, but very, very effective against cancers and a tremendous other array of diseases. So we're looking again at cannabis, which of course has now been made legal in a great number of countries: Uruguay, California, Portugal, Canada, I believe. On it goes, and gradually it will become legal everywhere because it's clearly a good thing, not a bad thing. And if you were to compare it to tobacco and alcohol, it's like a saint compared to those poisons. Okay, pharmaceuticals, agricultural chemicals, food processing chemicals, fluoride, glyphosate, and I think I'll do separately chemtrails. But those other collection of poisons, industrial poisons, are generally done by the same group of companies, and yet all shown to be tremendously damaging. I'm going to give one tiny example, and that's in Australia. There's a very popular biscuit called Tim Tams, quite delicious actually, made by Arnott's. It has recently been bought by Campbell's. It's part of IG Farben, the famous people who created the poisons for the death camps during the Second World War. Anyway, if you look at the label, look at the package, and fold back the flap, you'll see the ingredients. And in the ingredients, you will find a number of chemicals, 512 or 322 or whatever the numbers are. But you look up those numbers on the internet, and you'll find that they are known carcinogens. That's substances known to create cancer. So that's what's in our foods in the supermarket, is a great collection of poisons. Same with agricultural poisons. There have been tests done on people working in these agricultural poison factories have been puzzled by the fact that they can't have children, and when they've been examined, they've discovered that they're all sterile. All the people working in these agricultural poison factories are sterile. On it goes. Food processing, very similar. Fluoride and glyphosate. Now, fluoride has never been shown to have any useful effect on teeth. In fact, quite the opposite. There's a fluorosis, a term regarding the damage done to teeth by fluoride. But apparently when that's mixed with glyphosate, the Roundup thing, and then you subject people to the electromagnetic radiation, it takes these various poisons that accumulate in our body and takes them through the blood-brain barrier. Anyway, there is a bright note on the horizon, and that is that people are waking up to these huge companies that are doing us lots of harm, and we are starting to get a big groundswell of people who are starting to live in a manner which is sane, sustainable, without the poisons, without the electromagnetic radiation. Media, I'll mention briefly, is in many cases owned, as I've mentioned before, by the armaments companies. That's clearly so in America with the NBC, owned by NBC, owned by a huge electrical company, General Electric, which is a massive armaments maker, and Westinghouse, that makes nuclear power stations and nuclear bombs, by the way. They own ABC America, so that's a sort of a trend, a big trend in America, but it's sort of reflected slightly less obviously around the world, where the media is owned by the armaments companies, which of course promote wars everywhere and attacks on all sorts of countries that certainly don't deserve being attacked. Money, I mentioned money before, but money is it's a convenient fiction. It's, if someone buys a house, say for sort of $1 million, say, they don't deliver a truckload of banknotes. They just transfer the money digitally or whatever. This money, in fact, 97% of all the money in existence in the Western world doesn't actually exist at all. It's simply a digital tickle on a screen. There's no actual money there at all. And the people who create that money are a very small number of people who control the banks and the central banks and have these special drawing rights where they can literally create any amount of money at all. I had a friend, unfortunately, recently died, Alistair Carnegie, part of the Carnegie family. He said to me, if I want $1 trillion, I can get it. Well, how many people do you know who can create $1 trillion from thin air? That's what these big companies do. And we can greatly improve upon that by having a universal income system where everybody is issued with a reasonable amount of money, the totality of which is enough to, sorry about the dogs barking, which is enough to buy everything in the marketplace, but not more. So there is zero inflation, zero poverty, very great reduction in crime. Certainly there won't be crime for people who are hungry and stealing food. Anyway, I hope that's a brighter ending for you, my friends, and we'll meet again sometime soon. Thank you so much. Chris@znews.tv is my email. Please contact me.